Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This week's show we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the live-action Avatar: The Last Airbender, Season 1, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we had that opening, which, once again, this is something like... there's a little elements that it play in the show that I'm like, is that something they're doing just for the live action, or was that the anime the original series as well, where we got that opening with the Fire Nation, kind of, they're being rebels amongst the Fire Nation, because it showcases, right, not everyone's on board with this. It's just, I feel like I don't remember that much. There, I think, end up being storyline elements and developments that go down that lane eventually, but I feel like I don't, obviously, especially this early on in the show, because, I don't, because Zuko is your peek into the Fire Nation side of things, but even then, I don't think you really dive into like the Fire Nation as a whole until much later on in the show. But it's like seeing there being like people who do not agree with the Fire Nation, because it's always, I think in my head, I always looked at the Fire Nation as like a united front for the most part, where it's like they're all about it. Once again, it's like, well, Ozai's a tyrant, so it's like you're not going to go up against him. So anyone who might feel a little differently, with the exception of Iroh has his reservations about everything, but even he kind of lets things kind of stay their status quo. But I just, in my head, I'm trying to remember whether or not the original series ever covered something like that. Like, we see, like, rebels amongst the Fire Nation. And the moment, like, the girl, they're like, oh, yeah, this person here to help us. I was like, is that Azula? Turns out it is. I was like, because I know I looked up the cast last episode, but I was like, I don't think that, like, even correlate. I don't even know if I recognize that, but it just felt like, yeah, that feels like an Azula move. Like, if there's dissonance amongst the Fire Nation, of course, like, and because that's what I'm like, did Azula ever do that in the original series? Because once again, I remember her character, I just don't remember her introduction into the show. Because I talked about it last episode, I think she is getting pushed up more in the show, in the live action, because I think she's not really fully introduced until, like, maybe, I think I remember hearing someone say book 2. Maybe she was in book 1 and I just don't remember. But because I don't even remember her introduction. But I'm like, the aspect of her pretending to be someone to trick people, I feel like that seems familiar. So that's why I'm like, is that something I'm making up? Like, either that is something she did in the original series and I just don't remember. Even if it's not, it felt like an Azula move. If you know personality enough, it's like her being someone's like, oh, I'm going to give you false hope, and then I'm going to enjoy while, not only when it's stricken away from you, but also when my father burns you alive. Like, she got that, like, as we all know, Azula is sadistic. Which is so interesting, too, that you get a lot of insight into their family in this episode. Just a little bit, we only get Azula for, like, 2 seasons. 2 seasons, Jesus, 2 scenes. So, but I think it gives you an interesting insight, but it's also like, how much am I, like, adding to that because of my own experience with the series of, I know Azula and her motivations, like, just like I understand Zuko's motivations, which the show, obviously the live action's done a great job of, like, cementing that home of, like, his motivation, his drive, and you get that in Azula, but it speaks volumes even a little bit we see, but like I said, how much of that's just me adding context from, just my experience with this series as a whole, the original series as a whole and everything. But because, like, she loved, like, once again, not only seeing that guy get burned alive, because he was like, right, not everyone is on board with what Ozai has planned, but he's like, great, like, that BS, that even Iroh was like, yes, some people believe that prosperity and peace can come about under one group's rule, And Ozai's peddling that BS. It's like, right, but it's like, who says it has to be your rule? You're making, once again, it's a tyrant making any excuses to justify their actions. You wanted power, you got power, and, that's all that kind of, obviously, there's some past stuff, obviously, the show hasn't really gotten into at this point in stage in the story to really kind of discuss the past of how we got to where we are, how the Fire Nation got to where it is now. But at least, like, Ozai's still kind of keeping the status quo of the Fire Nation reigning, and he just, it's all about power for him. And I mean, and we see that is similar in Azula, because she's like all happy, like, oh yeah, look at them believing that the Avatar is still alive. And the moment her father was like, yeah, actually there might be more truth to that. This is from some commander who's kind of low rank, doesn't mean anything, but apparently your brother did it. Your brother did what I asked him to do. He did the impossible. He found the Avatar. And you see Azula like pissed about it, because for her it's a situation of she's not next in line. It's her brother. Even though he's the big disgrace that he is to the family and to the Fire Nation and yada, 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 he's still, despite everything, it's that jealousy. It just shows you how Ozai raised him, where it's like, it's a competition. And for Azula, it's like, I'm the one that's more skilled. I'm the one that stayed behind. And I'm the one rooting out spies and stuff. I'm not like, any rebellions and stuff. I'm like rooting all that out here. I've done everything father's asked of me. But what happens? Zuko, the one who was banished by her father, gets a gallivant around the world, got it on easy street, and yet he's the one that's going to get the praise. It's like, nah, it's not fair. He shouldn't be the one that's able to be in a situation to get back to her. It's like, no, it's not fair. There's not much she can do here, but she's like, you know what? Actually, it is. So she reaches out to Zhao, and she's like, right, you report any information specifically about my brother and his actions, and I will reward you handsomely later on down the road. So we find out that, Zhao is in a position where it's like he's not in a favorable position amongst the Fire Nation himself. Like once again, it kind of showcases everyone, a lot of people in the Fire Nation. It's just built off of who can we screw over just to make our situations better. We see that reflected with Zhao. We see that reflected with Azula. It's screw you, I gotta get mine. It's the mentality so many people. It's survival of the fittest. Who could get to the top, and how many people are you willing to burn and bury just to get not even like big leaps and bounds, like who are scrounging for scraps. We also got our introduction to Azula's, like, I guess they kind of get allocated to her lackey / cronies. Her it's weird to kind of say friends because of just Azula and her personality, but I'm trying to think, like, I distinctly remember the name Mai, which is one of the friends, but I'm trying to think, like, I think I saw the other, is it Ty Lee? I did not remember her. I was like, I completely forgot about you guys until, like, you popped up. I was like, right, you're Azula's cronies. But it's like, because I have a vague memory of where their stories end up going. I just don't remember fully off the top of my head. And obviously I don't want any answers, because obviously that's spoilers and stuff. But it's like, it's just a problem of, like, once again, it's that nagging thing of, like, I remember some things, and it's just, there's also, like, just so much I ended up forgetting about Avatar: The Last Airbender. But there's, like, vague memories, like, nuggets of, like, memories and stuff. I feel like I feel like specifically there's stuff related to my story that I feel like I remember, but I can't figure it out on top of my head what it was and what I'm thinking of. Either way, I just thought that was fun. Just introduction to Azula, and just kind of was like, oh, it's so in line with her personality. Once again, even if that's something she never did in the original series, it's something she would do if she never did it. But obviously we still haven't seen, like, the tip of the iceberg of just how, like, vindictive and just, like, let's face it, psychopathic Azula is. Sociopathic. But once again, it's just, that all stems from, like, that nature versus nurture conversation about just how the nurture of it all, how it affected Zuko and how it affected Azula. Which is so interesting, too, because I brought up this whole notion about, like, the Fire Nation in particular having the very stab each other in the back mentality, whereas Zuko's not about that, because he has this conversation with Iroh later on when it's like, oh, word got out that in Omashu, like, there were these firebenders that kind of attacked. But, like, Zuko's like, no, we wouldn't do that. My father would never allow anyone to do that, because what kind of opponent hides their face? You face your opponent. Because for Zuko, it is all about honor. It is wild to think about it, but he does have his own honor. He believes in the honor of the Fire Nation. But Iroh is subtly trying to creep, like, hey, we don't know about what the Fire Nation's true north is anymore. Basically, like, yeah, but you believe the Fire Nation one way because you had your perspective on things. You kind of saw things through your own lens. Iroh's kind of showing him like things might not have always been the way you perceived them to be. The Fire Nation is not what you perceived them to be. So it is just kind of that thing of like Zuko's not able to kind of take a step back, but little by little, Iroh's trying to like teach him in so many ways, and so many trying to, I guess, also make him not like Azula and his father so obsessed with power. And it's just like, I understand how important this mission is to you, and that's why I'm here, but I'm trying to like steer you in the right direction to help you go about this the right way. But it's just, once again, it just shows you the parallels of Zuko, Azula, and Ozai. Like I said, Azula's a lot more like their father than Zuko is, but Zuko still has a little bit of his father in him too. But you do see that he's such a sympathetic character in some regards, but also it's just, once again, how much of that's just me bringing from how much of I know about Zuko and his story and his history, how much am I just attributing to this, and we haven't quite gotten to that. But I think even in the live action, they've kind of touched at points of like there's sympathy in just like, yeah, his dogged hunt for the Avatar, but for him of how much it matters. But we haven't gotten to the insights of why it matters so much, why he spent the past 3 years, beyond just the honor and just into like some very important points in correlation with Ozai and Zuko's relationship that really hammer home and make you go, oh wow, he's sympathetic in some regards, you know? How far you're willing to go for honor and to be able to go back home. I mean, you were literally forbidden from coming back home until you get this done. So there's a lot to that. So I mean, it even goes back to episode 1 when he took Sokka's, because one of the people with him is like, we don't have to do that, but Zuko was like, no, where would be the honor in that? It's like, if he wants to face me, I will put you down, but I'm going to face my opponent when I take them down, when I take their life. You know, there is honor in that. You know, he's like, I'm not going to take the coward's approach, which is interesting when I think about a future storyline that toes that line of doing a very dishonorable thing. It's a book 2 thing. How book 2 ends. That Zuko thing where I'm like, yeah, that wasn't the most honorable thing you did there in a lot of capacities, in a lot of ways. But either way, tangents and all that aside, we're not even there at that point in the story. But it's just that obviously pops into my head. A bit chunk of this episode is about Katara obviously still struggling with her water bending, because after Aang had talked to her last episode about using like her emotions, or was that this episode? I think it was this episode about using your emotions as, you know, a means of controlling certain techniques when it comes to bending. But for her, like, last episode got her thinking about her mom's death, and that's all she can kind of focus on. It's brought up a lot of bad memories, and it's affecting her bending. Of course, like, your bending is tied to, like, you having equilibrium means there's going to be equilibrium and steady and balance to your bending. But if you are being, your emotions can sway your bending in so many different ways, as we know. So, but anyway, our crew makes their way to Omashu, because Aang thought he saw another Airbender, which he was excited about, but it turns out it's Tio. And it's like, I do not remember Tio and his father Sai. I'm like, these characters, I'm like, I don't feel like I even have an inkling of scratch in the back of my head, which is also interesting. I'm going to butcher his name, but it's like, the actor, I saw he was in the cast, I just didn't know what character he was playing. Danny, like, I've never seen a lot of Community, but I know he's kind of best known for Community. But he's playing Sai, and I once again, I don't remember those characters at all. I'm also surprised they haven't set this up yet. I wonder would this been around the time they would have set that up. The whole Aang obviously having a thing for Katara. I wonder, because I feel like, didn't that come up pretty early in the show? Like him obviously having a crush on her, but she didn't like 100% view him the same way at this point in the story. I'm trying to remember, because I'm like, they're friendly, like they were just decently friendly, but it also seemed like she was kind of, I don't know, smitten when they first met Jet and he was helping them. It's like, oh yeah, this is my wife. Like, obviously we don't have that great of a crop supply, but my wife, she told me about watering. I was like, oh, but that's why I married her. And she kind of went along with it. It's like, yeah, my brother-in-law, who was a mute at birth, can't talk, but the way he's able to communicate. Poor Sokka was just ready, because he was so ready, like, oh, I get to play this role, I get to play. Okay, cool. Thanks for killing my my improv moment, bro. But there's that disheartening that Aang obviously has, where it's like, right, just for a moment you're like, oh, maybe I'm not the last. Oh, I still am the last Airbender. I thought you were an Airbender, but you're just using tech, which is funny to say, especially considering where this universe does go, in fact, when it comes to tech, because it's kind of very much in the same Naruto vein of like, oh, like Naruto being set in the world it is, but you do see the advancement of like, there is what would be considered like almost modern technology in that world. Like, it's just kind of an interesting thing to kind of say in correlation of where this universe goes over the years. But like I was bringing up, I don't remember Sai and Tio's storylines like at all. But it is interesting the correlation and connections that they have. Like, obviously, having someone else probably closer to his age, someone who is very much optimistic and believing like, right, we can fight back, because if we don't do it, who else will, type of situation. Mentality that Tio has, that Aang has as well, where it's like, right, he sees what the Fire Nation does, and it's like, right, I want to help. Yes, we have to get to the Northern Tribe, but if we don't help, who will? Like, I'm the Avatar. I want to help as many people as I can, and it starts helping one person at a time. Someone like Tio and Sai, who are trying to do their best as well. I mean, Sai doesn't want to get too in the middle of the fight. With his being the mechanist, he's able to, or not the mechanist, the mechanist, right? And how they pronounce it. It's being that person, he's able to come up with so many ideas that could be used to fight against the Fire Nation. He just doesn't want to, because he's scared, because after everything they've been through, it's just him and his son in the world, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to protect his son. And so he's not really willing to really go above and beyond, essentially. Even though his son, it's like his son's like, I love my dad, I respect my dad. It's just, he sadly doesn't have the courage to take up this fight. But obviously Tio does, because he's like, we can't let them keep doing what they do, because if we don't stand up and fight, then who will? If we have to be willing to take this shot, no matter how slim or small it seems, even when it just seems like it's us against the world, it's us on our own. Like, we have to take that leap of faith. We have to show courage. But also how Sai's story influenced Sokka's story, because it's like, oh, like it's like, right, they're kind of bonding over the stuff that he's built, and it's like, oh, so you've implemented this back home. He's like, no, I haven't. There was no time to really dive into his engineer side of things. It is that complication of, I had to step up. I had to be a warrior to protect my family and my dad was the warrior. Like, this stuff, it's like, no, it's a hobby. It's like, but his side's like, the fact of the matter is, there's so many warriors in this world. There are very few engineers. And he's like, Sokka, you have the capabilities. You should never basically push down a part of who you are just for the sake of you're being this warrior. Is it 100% because you want to be this warrior? You believe yourself to be this warrior? Or was this the role you were cast in because your father needed you to be this warrior? He needed you to step up, And it's like, it doesn't mean Sokka won't find that balance between the two, but I think for the first time, it's a little bit of him hearing like, it's okay to have wants outside of what your father kind of wants you, which, I mean, obviously there's parallels to there where you can once again draw the Zuko, but it's like, just in Sokka's case, just I think for the first time he'd gotten permission from someone just to like just be himself. He doesn't have to be this warrior. It's like, no, like, you like engineering stuff. Like, you could be an engineer. You could be a great engineer. The passion is there. The intuition is there. And it was just kind of this small moment of just, you could see like the cogs turning inside of Sokka of like, it's what that can mean in a grander scheme for Sokka is just all I'm getting at. But Katara ends up, getting on her side of the story fully introduced to Jet and his rambunctious little group of kind of, he's in like that Robin Hood vein of like, hey, we're freedom fighters and we're going about this. Once again, like, I feel like I slightly remember Jet. Like, when he was introduced, I'm like, we're going to find out he's a spy, he's an undercover agent, but like him being just kind of like a freedom fighter, I'm like, I knew something was off with the dude. I thought I remembered something being off with him, but once again, it's like, I don't remember them that well. But it's like, yeah, they're a group that, hey, we found a family after everything we've lost. We found each other again, which, you know, obviously Katara connects with the whole notion of losing a parent. I mean, even despite everything, Jet's lessons to Katara helped because it allowed her to focus. She was so focused on like remembering her mom's death. It's like, remember the good things about your mom. What do you remember about her when she was alive? And it's like the little things that mattered the most. And that's what ended up helping Katara bend and kind of get better control of her bending again. But then later on finds out that Jet's not necessarily evil, but he's willing to cross whatever lines in the grander scheme of things because he's talked about, how the king has gone blind and senile and has kind of let the Fire Nation spies fester amongst us. And to root out this evil, kind of root out this cancer, we're going to have to do it like, yes, I blew up that building, but because we blew up that building, those 3 like Fire Nation spies we tackled earlier and dealt with, we were able to root them out because of that. Some sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. It's like how far and how far are you willing to go for your kind of your justice and for this fight. It's that towing that line of I'll do whatever it takes for the greater good, whatever sacrifices have to be made, you know. And that ended up being obviously tying into like the Kyoshi conversation about, you know, the cost and the responsibilities, you know, that conversation she had with Aang last episode. Because Jet didn't care how many innocent people had to die as long as it meant like sacrifices had to be made for the greater good. So they set up this whole situation to have not only Sai die, but they were also going to kill the king because they're like, right, the king allowed his failure as a king is what let all this happen. So he needs to be wiped off the board. Luckily, Katara and Sokka got there in time to stop the whole situation from happening. So while all of that is happening, Zuko and obviously Iroh are in Omashu, and Zuko goes after Aang, obviously trying not to do any bending to draw any attention to himself. But I do love that whole sequence, especially when Aang, during the fight, this lady comes out of nowhere and starts smacking him. It's like, what are you doing? Like, how dare you hit the little kid? I'm like, is that something straight from the original series, or was that just something kind of in the moment they came? I don't remember. I was like, I love that bit. Just like, yeah, because like Aang is like a little kid, and it's like, how dare you, an older person, like start beating up on the little kid type of situation. I also love that Zuko now knows that Aang's the one that took his book, because he was like, wait, why are you? Is that why you've been after me for 3 years just because I'm the enemy to the Fire Nation? She's like, wait, how'd you know it was 3 years? Even I was like, how did he know? And then he brought up the book. I was like, all right, I completely forgot about that. It's like, right. He took it in episode 1. I actually let that slip my mind. I'm like, right. It was kind of a journal, but I guess Zuko didn't comment on everything, considering Aang doesn't know Zuko's motivation yet of why he's so adamant about going after him. Oh, really quickly, circling back to like funny bits. Obviously, we got the cabbage guy situation. I love that they did it. They cut him off twice about it, his cabbages, and he finally got his moment. It's my cabbage. I'm like, there you go. Because I feel like I remember people talking about the cabbage guy in correlation. I don't remember if it was like something directly because we knew about it from the show, or whether people were wondering if they were going to do the cabbage guy bit. Do correct me if I'm wrong about this too. I don't know if I'm full of like crap on this, or whether there's something real to this. Like, is that the guy who voices the cabbage guy from the original series? I don't know. I swear I remember hearing that, but that could be me 100% making that up. It might not even be him, but I could have sworn I've heard something in relation to the cabbage guy in correlation to the live action, and I just don't remember if that's just something I made up and made canon in my head, or whether it's like, no, that is the guy. I swear I heard that somewhere, but I could be just like fully incepting myself into believing that's true. I don't know. But we also had Zuko getting away because Iroh drew attention to himself, and it's like, you know, Zuko kind of feels guilty because it's like, well, Uncle Iroh like calls a ruckus to getting them to focus on him, and it's like, here I am kind of running away, so he's kind of feeling a little bit like a coward, which I don't know if this is going to correlate in us finally getting more of Zuko's backstory next episode, considering like what happened this episode, and especially because him and Iroh made such a point of, no, we'll go to Omashu. Zhao was the one who's like, no, I have connections, we can call it, and it's like, right, Zuko kept giving him a lot of pushback about like, I want less and less people to know, because he's kind of acting like no, this is my mission. I can't let anyone else know. Like, he seems kind of like the whiny prince a little bit in a regard, but once again, it's just because this is that important to him, and he doesn't want anyone snatching that away, which obviously his sister's up here doing her thing too, plotting her machinations. It's interesting too because they talk about that soldier. What was it? Was it I don't think it was Commander G. It's something. It might be just Officer G. I think is his name. The main guy that Zuko and Iroh interact with amongst their crew. Turns out he's the one that told Zhao's men about the hunt for the Avatar. He tried to say because I guess he's also the guy that was running his mouth in the first episode that it's like, I like our location and stuff like that. We could go somewhere that's hot instead of here where it's cold. In episode 1, I think it was the same dude. So he's a disgruntled employee, probably venting, not realizing like the grand scheme of what he's doing when he's running his mouth off to Zhao, especially because Zuko doesn't treat him right. But Zuko's all about like, right, I might be complaining, but at the end of the day, he's still a commanding officer. The Fire Nation, we have rules. We have rules as native people of the Fire Nation. Even out here, those rules still apply because we are still Fire Nation. Even out here, even being outcast, even being banished, we are still the Fire Nation. So that rule of hierarchy still matters. It still is in place. So it's like, right, I might be complaining about Zhao. That doesn't give you an open invitation to talk about a commanding officer in the same vein. It's just, that's not how it works. We have our hierarchy, our structure for a reason. Either way, it's going to be interesting to see where the next episode goes, because we had the whole Sai situation. He was potentially working with a Fire Nation spy, but the question then becomes like, well, is this kind of what Sokka was saying? Like, right, you don't know if Sai was like on orders to like get close to like, you don't know what you saw, Katara. That is something that was unresolved this episode, but obviously we're not done with Omashu. Once again, where things kind of go, I've got a pretty good idea of what some of next episode is going to be about. I don't know if it's going to be what all of next episode is going to be about in correlation to Aang getting captured and meeting a certain someone next episode. It seems highly probable. Like I said, I've seen the scenes of it. I just didn't know when in the show we were getting to it. So it seems like next episode would be it. Because I think we got our like first appearance, but not the true revelation about a certain character this episode. They didn't really even have a speaking line. They were just on screen. So that's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out next episode. And like I said, try to like fully figure out like the Sai of it all. I'm like, what was he on orders from the king to like suss out any like Fire Nation people or what? Or was that just purely all for like protecting Tio? I don't remember, and maybe next episode will refresh my memory about that. Maybe, if any of my memory comes back about the Sai and Tio thing. But I'm interested to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.